Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Govs on the Go, Alumni Edition, a podcast featuring alumni from the College of Arts and Letters here at Austin Peay State University. My name is Dr. Buzz Hoon. I'm the host of the podcast. I'm also the dean of the college. And today I'm talking with Jerry Winsett, who graduated from Austin Peay and is from the class of 1972. Jerry, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
And we've got so much to talk about. I'm not sure if we're going to have an expanded version of the podcast. We'll see how it goes here. Let's give everybody a life update. Where are you? What's going on? I'm sure that a lot of people know, but maybe they don't.
Right now, I'm living in Wilmington, North Carolina. I moved here from Los Angeles because there was a period of time, and it's still true, where North Carolina was the third largest film production company state in the country, and it just seemed like it was a better fit for me, having been born in the South and raised in the South, to come and do the work here. Plus, I had a 5-year-old son. I really wanted to grow up in a neighborhood like I had, where he could go out and play and on the street and such like that. So. And it's been a really good fit for me. I've really enjoyed it here. I still go back to LA to work sometimes, and I travel all over to work. I went to Prague a few years ago to work. But this is my home base, and I like it here. And it's real close to the ocean. I like that.
That's awesome. And we're going to talk about your career and how you've gone from locally here in being in Clarksville and on the Austin Peay stage. To all the, even recently in movie work and doing lots of different things there from your home base, and we're awfully proud of all the accomplishments. So let's rewind though for everybody, because I like to start at the beginning.
Okay.
And that would mean starting here in Clarksville. And I always like to find out from people, now that you've had some time to reflect, how do you think that your time in Clarksville, growing up here, maybe influenced who you were? Was it part of your environment? How was your family in terms of where, now that you've had some time to look back on your career, what's impacted you?
I owe a lot to growing up where I grew up and who I grew up with. I was not a typical Tennessean. I was always a flaming liberal and always involved in civil rights and such as that. And I got into a number of those marches and such with folks from Austin Peay. But as a young kid, I just loved playing outside. I loved being outside. I went barefoot almost all the time. That's typical Tennessee boy. I had an uncle, and I would go to his farm every summer during school break and work on the farm. And then I'd come back to Clarksville, and I would be spending my time in movie theaters and going to concerts and things like that. So I had the best of both worlds of growing up in the South in Clarksville. I fondly remember my times at the Roxy and Capitol Theater and at the Sunset Drive-In and Moonlit Drive-In. It was a great place and time to be a kid. I loved it there. And when I started thinking about going to college, I was the first person in my family to ever go to college. I thought about moving away. I thought about a number of different colleges, but I loved Clarksville. I wanted to stay here. And so many people don't know this, but I started as an agriculture major at Austin Peay, and things escalated quickly from there.
What was, before we get too far along, what did you think you wanted to do at that time?
I wanted to be a veterinarian. That's
Okay.
what I thought I wanted to do when I was 18 years old, and I started Austin Peay in the summer session, so just a month or so after I graduated from high school. And I wanted to be a veterinarian, so I enrolled in the pre-veterinary program, which was the agricultural program there then. And uh, I had played trumpet all through uh, um, all through high school. I actually think I wrote in a yearbook once that I wanted to be the world's best veterinarian who played the trumpet or something like that. And I I had music as a minor, so it was an odd thing. The goal was in 2 years at the P, then I would go to Auburn and get my degree as a veterinarian. Um, who I guess I figured would be moonlighting as a jazz trumpet player at night. but but somewhere along the way, I realized that was not the path that I wanted to take. It's very stressful to keep a 4.0 average, which you have to do, and to get it to move from Austin Peay or any other college into Auburn's veterinary program. And I got a B on my midterm in chemistry, and I was just devastated. So went to talk to the instructor, and I said, "Can I do extra work and bring this up to an A? Can I retake the test?" And he said, "No, we have the midterm and the final. If you get an A on the final, maybe I'll give you an A." And I thought, that's not helpful. So my very next class was, and I'm not making this up, beef cattle 101. And I went into my beef cattle class, and the instructor started passing out the midterms there and said, "Well, ladies and gentlemen, you have Jerry Winsett to thank that there is no curve on this exam because he got a 99." And everybody hated me because like the next highest score was an 80 something. And I thought, so maybe I'm getting a message from God and or the universe that maybe this is not what I should be thinking about. And I still remember what question I missed. It was about liquid fertilizer on that beef cattle exam. So I walked out and I went over to the music department and changed my major to music.
So had you in high school or even younger than that shown any you said you played the trumpet in high school, but did you have any feeling that people I can entertain people? This is something I seem to have a natural ability to do.
I didn't think of it that way. And actually, I think my love of music came from watching the movie The Music Man over and over again. And it was years later that I realized that what I liked about that movie was not just the music, but the performance. And it is to this day, me thinking about that. I didn't realize that it took something to make me realize that. And many, many years later, I had the very good fortune to meet Robert Preston. I was invited back to his dressing room after a play that he was in, and we talked about it. And I had an original Broadway production playbill from Music Man
Oh
when he was there, and I had asked him to sign it, and I sent it back with the stage manager, and the stage manager came back and said he wants to see you. And we had an amazing talk. And I remember telling him that he was the reason that I ended up in music and then from there into theater. And he said, "Please don't blame me for anything that goes wrong." And I said, "Oh, I don't. I know anything that goes wrong is all on me." But that's how it worked out. I got in the music department, and And I started getting involved in what was an Easy A opera workshop, which, we did one opera the whole time I was there. Otherwise, it was just musical theater. And I was on stage. The first one is just a cowboy in Oklahoma. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that a lot. I thought, wow, this is fun to be singing up here in front of people. I mean, all my singing experiences up to then had been in chorale and chorus, and I had a rock band back then called The Vast Minority. And and so the next year, Dr. Goddard, who was always ran the opera workshops, asked me if I wanted to do a speaking role, and he asked me to do Stewpot in but South Pacific, and I read it and I said, "Oh no, no, no! I wouldn't feel comfortable. I can sing in front of people, but I can't talk. I can't act." And he said, "Well, please do something." So I took a lesser role, the role of Billis, and then I went up. And the first time I walked down on stage and started singing and performing Billis with an audience, it was just like electricity going through me. And I I know that uh, when I came out for curtain call that night and I got the applause, it was as if I had gotten a shot of adrenaline. And then I realized that no, this is what I want to do. I want to do this.
Mm.
And so I think like a day or two later, went down and talked to Dr. Filippo and told him I wanted to change my major to theater and keep music as a minor again. And the rest is, as they say, history. I loved being on stage. I just loved it, and I knew that's what I wanted to do from now on.
You mentioned one of the legends around here, and shortly after I came, I got to meet Dr. Filippo, and I see him as part of the real legacy of what goes on here at Austin Peay. And such a wonderful man, but so influential on a lot of people.
I have more great memories about Doc than we have time to talk about if we talked all day. He is still one of my best friends. He's my mentor. Um, I will remember one thing. He's a magnificent teacher in so many ways. I remember that I pretty much got everything I auditioned for, and I was spoiled. And so I auditioned for uh, um, Midsummer Night's Dream, and I wanted the role. I wanted the role of Bottom. I didn't get it, so I went into Joe's office, being all indignant and saying, "I thought I read for that really well." He said, "Oh yeah, you would have been the best Bottom, no question about it." I said, "But you didn't give it to me." And he said, "Because if I let you leave here thinking you get everything you want, you won't be prepared, and you
Mm.
can go on. You've got to be prepared for that." And and then he said, "You will have many chances in your life to play Bottom." And he named the actor who got it and said, "He will never get this opportunity again." And I left thinking, now that is what they call wisdom, which I had not been experiencing a lot of on my personal self. And
Right.
and it was years later, many years later, that I was in the Tennessee Shakespeare uh, Festival production of Midsummer Night's Dream, playing Bottom, and Joe came to see me. And that was one of the greatest moments of my life when he came up to me afterwards and said, "I told you so."
Oh, wow. That is a
Yeah,
perfect story about Dr. Filippo.
yes, it is. Yes, it is. And
So,
Griff was a huge, uh, uh, um, which he was a legend back then. Also, was also a huge influence on me. I had three of my basic building blocks in Dr. Filippo and Dr. Goddard and Griff. I mean, it was just magic. And I've had the opportunity to talk with and work with some of the instructors that are there, and they have that same heart. and that same feeling. So, it's great.
Yeah. Well, I always like to share with or at least hear the stories from people, what they remember during their period of time. And so I'm going to see if I can waken up a memory within you,
Okay.
and you can tell me about the kazoo ensemble and Charlie Compton.
Charlie Compton was a legend among those of us in the theater department because he was one of the finest actors I have ever worked with, and it always amazed me that he didn't make that his profession. But uh, he was in the AP Playhouse, and I was the president of that. And he was talking to us about doing something that was fun, and we should all get kazoos and play. And then he had this kind of sparkle in his eye, and he said, "You know what? We could become a group here at Austin Peay." So he founded and made all the arrangements for us to be a legitimate group at APSU called the Philharmonic University Kazoo Ensemble. And we would meet and play just to have fun. But the biggest thing that he liked was that he actually got us our photo in the yearbook. And everyone was realizing at that period of time that Philharmonic University Kazoo Ensemble, the anagram is puke. And it was fun time. We were a rascally bunch back then.
Any other memories that you have during that time of Austin Peay, and because it sounded like you're getting lots of experience and a lot of opportunities.
I can tell you one that I will never forget is in that production of uh, A Midsummer Night's Dream, where I did not get bottom. I got the role of Flute and Thisbe, and and I was actually having fun with that role. So I was really getting into it, and it was opening night, and in the Thisbe part, um, you're playing a female when uh, you have to pad yourself. And I was back there in my costume getting ready to put my padding in, and Griff was sitting back there, and he was blowing up balloons. And he looked at me and he said, why don't you try these? And he had this kind of mischievous look in his eye, and I thought, oh, I know what you're thinking. So I went out on stage with the balloons in there, and when Thisbe stabs herself, come blade my breast imbue, the balloon popped. And the laughter was uproarious. It was so loud. And I just had this look like, and then, you know, adieu, adieu, adieu. And I fell forward and the other one popped. I mean, it was one of those magical moments on theater where nobody was expecting that, not even the other people on stage. I'd never done that in rehearsal. So Joe comes striding on stage, backstage after the show, and he looks at me and he says, "You better be glad that." And then he started laughing, and I said, "It wasn't my idea." He said, "Oh, I know, it was Griff."
And you created a memory for the rest
Yeah,
of for everyone for
I,
the rest of their
I will
life.
never forget that, and I've given that hint to other Isbees that have worked with me over the years.
So during that, and I'm trying to make sure to recall this, and please correct me if this is incorrect, but you were working also as a radio DJ.
I
And
did. I started with my roommate Greg Richmond, and we did a little morning thing over at WDXN where we were the people who talked about what was going on at the university, and it was the Crash and Fang show because Crash was one of my many nicknames in high school, and from that I got interest from the the people at WDXN if I wanted to maybe become a disc jockey for the weekend, like the Sunday show or something like that. And I said, well, yeah, that sounds fun because extra money is always good when you're a college student.
Mhm.
First thing I had to do was study a lot and go take the licensing exam in Nashville, because back in those days, if you were a disc jockey,
Yeah,
you were
that's
doing all the technical stuff too, and you had to know what you were doing. I passed, I got my license, and I went and worked at WDXN for I don't even remember how long I was there, but yeah, I enjoyed that because I enjoy music so much.
yeah. And you were singing in a band, as you had mentioned, and you're doing the acting. And what I really appreciate from all of that is our students need to understand as well. You were kind of, whether you were realizing or not, brick by brick, sort of building a portfolio, something that says, this is the start of a career. Even in college, you're starting that establishment for that. And looking back on it now, do you see how all those kind of little things may have contributed to your success?
So many things contributed to my success, and though, like you said, those building blocks. And it's one of the things that I encourage people who want to be in the acting business to do is do more than just act, because there's so many ways you can pull some of that into it. If you're going to spend your life representing someone else's life, do as many experiences as you can that you enjoy,
Mm.
so that you can pull those experiences into a character one day. My friend Cheryl Gibbs, who went to college with me, said once, and she and I worked on stage a couple of times there, and it was fun. She said, an artist is working even if they're just staring out the window, because we're taking everything in. If you don't take everything in, you're not what I call putting into your talent bank things that you have seen that you can call out and use again.
So the
Or
next part of your story is after graduation and moving to Nashville and starting that first starting career. What happens after graduation?
okay, here's what happened. Uh, all through high school, and I continued this through most of college, I worked for a veterinarian in Clarksville, and Dr. Morgan, because originally that's what I thought I was going to be, and after the fact, it turned out that I still enjoyed working there, so I kept working there. So I graduated from Austin Peay with 7 years of experience working with animals as a veterinary tech, and a degree in theater and speech and communication. So that's a really odd resume to be sending out to people.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, like most people who were living in Tennessee that time, their goal was to eventually get to Opryland, start working at Opryland. Everybody wants to work at Opryland. So I went to Opryland and I put in my application, and they looked at it and they said, I think we have something that's ideal for you. And I said, okay. They said, we'd like to offer you a job at the World of Animal Wonders. So I went and interviewed with the director of World of Animal Wonders, who was Kent Burgess, who was a well-known animal behaviorist. He trained the original Shamu, among other things that he had done. And he said, the problem is our people don't know how to behave on stage if an act goes wrong or something. And I need somebody who can not only be part of the production team, but who can help them. And I said, well, I think I can do that, but I don't have any experience training animals. I just am very comfortable working with them. And he said, I'm going to train you to train animals, and you're going to train them not to freak out on stage. And I said, okay. So I did that, and it was fun. I enjoyed it. I got to work with. I had a chimp named Bolivar P. Shagnasty, and I got to be on stage, and I got to work with people who were able to take direction from me, and so we worked together as a team. And then the time came that I said I need to get out and do something else. Um, and so I left Opryland and then started working at Ensemble Theater Company in Nashville, Nashville Children's Theater, which is still going strong. It's a funny story. Is there's a friend of mine here, Rob Zappel is his name, and he and I uh, are good friends. We'd known each other in California, then both ended up in North Carolina. And we used to have an ongoing poker game with some other friends. And we were talking about stuff we'd done in our past. And I said, yeah, I worked for National Theater, Children's Theater. And he said, well, so did I. And I said, oh, really? I did a production of Wind in the Willows. And before I could list any others, he said, I did a production of Wind in the Willows. So he goes back into his back room, opens up a big trunk, rifles through it, comes back with the program for Wind in the Willows, and we were both in it.
Oh my.
It had no memory of us working together in 1973.
I'll
It's
be.
amazing. Yeah. Um, and that's another thing I'll talk about is connections, making connections with people. And you know, sometimes you work with somebody, you never see them again. Sometimes you work with them the next show. Sometimes you work with them years later. But yeah, that was that moving me in from animal work into full theater. Then I left Nashville for New York City. And I was trying to be an actor in New York City and build my career there. I was actually living in Newark at the time. And I got a call from a friend of mine who I had worked with on his presentation at Opryland. And he said, I've got an opening here for an animal behaviorist at the Mystic Marine Life Aquarium. And I said, well, I'm acting now. And I'm struggling here in New York, trying to pay my rent in Newark, and I do have a summer stock production that's coming up. And he said, well, it would be a lot of fun. You'd be working with whales and dolphins and sea lions. And I said, well, it does sound like fun, but I I need to uh, work towards my goal to be a full-time professional actor. And he said, well, maybe you could do this for a while, just help us get some of these animals situated and working, and then you could make enough money to go back and maybe not have to live in Newark. And I said, well, how much are you paying? And he told me, and I said, when do you need me there? And I did that, and I trained a blind beluga whale, I trained sea lions, I trained dolphins, and I trained a harbor porpoise, and actually co-authored a story, actually a treatise about harbor porpoises with the head of the department, and got enough money to move back and start working in New York. And then I started doing off Broadway, and I started hitting that glass ceiling with Broadway, in that if you didn't have a TV or film credit, they didn't really want to see you on stage in Broadway at that particular point in time. And I said, well, I guess I'm going to move to LA. So I went to LA, started doing television, got booked on a number of sitcoms, and from that into films. And I just, it is like you said, it's building blocks. It's moving up. It's moving up. It's moving up. And I have no regrets. And my original plan was to make enough credits in LA to move back to New York and try for Broadway again. But when I realized, how much easier it is to do a film or a TV show and how much better they pay, I thought I'm going to stick it out here for a little while longer. But I returned to the stage here in Wilmington. I've done a number of plays here. I've won local awards here doing theater. I put that all aside because the next block was my own production company where I produced uh, murder mystery theater, live interactive theater at the House of Blues for 20 years,
Nice.
performing in it, writing the scripts, and still, having people to cover me so that I could still do film and TV work. And then when COVID came, I retired from that. I'd been thinking about it anyway. It's an hour and a half drive to work every night. Um, and so I closed the theater company. Um, and now I'm mentoring another murder mystery theater company in Myrtle Beach who's not doing the same type of stuff I did at all, but I'm just giving them some pointers on it. Because the thing is that you can retire from a section of what you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
but if you are truly an actor, it's in your blood and you never retire. Somebody said to me once, "Well, when are you just going to retire and enjoy life?" I said, "Do you think I don't enjoy life when I'm working? Heck, that's when I really enjoy life is when I'm working." I said, I'll stop acting when they close the lid on my casket. That's when I'll stop acting."
Just put me in a pose.
Yeah, really. Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to give you a costume to put me in.
Well, that's awesome. And let's just go back a little bit because I want to talk about your time in commercials, television shows, movies. What are some of your favorite memories you like to share with family members, friends, whatever, people that you met, things that you've experienced?
I, well, what a lot of people remember from me from commercials is that the iconic Time to Make the Donuts commercial, which was my first big commercial. I've done many commercials after that, and they're all floating around somewhere. Kentucky
Mm.
Fried Chicken. Oh, gosh, I could just list forever. And I did a lot of print work. And so those photos for me are probably floating around somewhere on the internet too. Um, I really, the interesting thing about, and I've never told this story in public before, the Time to Make the Donuts commercial is they had three assistants for Mike, who was the lead in all of those great commercials. And some producer came up to the director and said, "We were only supposed to hire two, so you've got to send one of these guys home." And the director, and gosh, I wish I could remember his name because he said, "If you send one of those kids home, I'm going home." Because he said, "You hired them. They've been looking forward to this. I'm going to use all three of them." And they did. Um, and that's when you're lucky as far as directors go. I've worked for a lot of directors. I've been directed by Woody Allen, by Angelica Houston, a lot. I think when you get right down to it, my two favorite directors in film and TV was my experience of working with Martin McDonough on Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, and working with Donald Glover as a director on an episode of Atlanta. But I I've been blessed to have worked with some greats and met some of my heroes. Um, just what was it? A month ago, I met and had a nice talk with Paul Rudd. With who else was at that premiere? Sometimes you meet people you don't expect to meet at a premiere. I was sitting at the bar getting a drink, and I looked to my right, and Alice Cooper was sitting next
Oh
to me,
my
and I struck
gosh.
up a conversation with him. And then earlier, I'd had a conversation with John Sebastian, who had written one of the songs that was in the movie. But I always become a fan when I meet those people.
Me
Uh,
too.
and And I've had a problem my whole life. Here's a confession. I've had a problem my whole life with accepting uh, praise. If somebody comes up and talks about how good I was at everything, it kind of embarrasses me because I just work, I just work. And I feel like I'm really glad you liked it. I just did the best I could do, and I was always too humble to really, which is odd for an actor to say, too humble, too embarrassed, too shy to really respond. And I remember somebody talking to me about how well I sang. And I said, well, it's God's voice. He lets me use it. And the person said, it's your voice. It's your voice. And I was at the premiere of Three Billboards, and I had confessed this to my brother-in-law, Mike Finn, and he says, you know what you say? You say thank you. You just say thank you. And I was I was standing there, and somebody came up to me, and I turned and looked, and it was a very famous actress. I don't like to name drop, even though I do sometimes. And it was Christine Lottie, and she started talking about how great I was in the movie, and I'm just looking at her and smiling, and my brother-in-law whispered in my ear, "Just say thanks." And I said, "Thank you." And she said, "You're very welcome." And then we started talking. And then she walked away. He said, "See what you've been missing?"
That is such a blessing, though, that you
I
can
know.
receive that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's such
Uh,
a cool story because, I think that sometimes of a 17-year-old Jerry,
mhm.
trying to
Yeah.
decide what am I going to do with the
Yeah.
rest of my life. And now, here X number of years later, you can say, I think you were sharing with me 50 years since you've been on the stage here at Austin Peay. If you could go back in time and say, guess what? It's going to turn out pretty darn cool.
Yeah. Yes. And as I say to young actors and even older actors who ask me for mentoring or advice, is that if you start out your career thinking I'm going to be a star, you might as well just go ahead and get a career in construction or something else like that, because you're going to be disappointed. What you want is a career. You don't want a job. Now, acting is a career that is a bunch of jobs. You know, you're auditioning, therefore interviewing all the time for a job, but your career is to do what you love to do, is to act and get paid for it. You don't have to be a star to do that. I mean, there are what we call journeyman actors, and you have to remember now that actor is a non-gender term for us. Everyone's an actor. Uh, we don't do actor and actress anymore in our awards show for Screen Actors Guild. If you can make a living doing it comfortably, you're a success. That's what success is: doing what you love and being able to put a roof over your head doing it. And I've been very blessed to have done that without having too many ancillary, necessary, what we call sustenance jobs along the life of my career. And I don't take that for granted. I don't. Um, it's not always easy, but the rewards are worth it. I'm going to share another experience with you. One of the people I have worked with a number of times in my career. He's a great friend, Blaine Davies, who was a soap opera star for a while. He and I did a production of Man of La Mancha, opening a new theater, and there was this. If you've seen the play, there's an incredibly long staircase that goes up, which is where Quixote and Sancho, I was Sancho, go up, and they walk to the top and nod goodbye to everybody and walk through to meet the Inquisition, and the door closes behind them. And we had one of those nights where it's what I call in the zone, where we weren't Lane and Jerry pretending to be Don Quixote and Sancho. We were Quixote and Sancho. and the audience was just incredible. They were eating it up, just absolutely wonderful. And we got up to the top of the stairs, the doors closed, and we looked at each other, and Lane said, "Nights like this are why we do theater."
Mm.
And I nodded. The next night, exactly the opposite. It was like there were mannequins in the audience. The door closes, and Lane says, "And nights like this are why we have technique." Because you do the work no matter what the audience is doing.
Yep.
The worst mistake you can make is you know your work is good and the audience isn't reacting, and you try to change your work to get to them. Just give them the work and they will appreciate it or they won't. And, you know, you're going to be surprised sometimes that the audiences that are not as responsive are the ones that are the most involved. And they will tell you that after the performance. They would, it's, you just got to always do your best job. That's it.
Well, one other area that I want to kind of highlight is that not only have you continued to act, you've also been gotten into writing both screenplay and poetry. And I'm just wondering, is that another just part of you that is you can't keep bottled up, that it just comes out as an expression of your spirit?
I'm working on a song right now with one of my good friends, a Christmas song, and I will always continue to not limit myself to creating in one way, because creating can be focused, but it doesn't have to be limiting. And sometimes it's just I write poems that nobody's ever read because I wrote them for myself. And I've written a number of scripts for everything from a what was the I wrote one on for a pharmacy company to be performed in front of them, and my lead character was Antibody because they were coming out with a new antibiotic, and it was an older woman named Antibody. And then I've written probably 50 scripts for murder mystery shows, and I've written poetry that has been published. Had a I've had a chicken and dumplings recipe published. You know, I don't when I write things, I don't necessarily write them thinking anything's going to happen to them. But I got invited to submit a recipe to the Celebrities of Tennessee cookbook, and I submitted my recipe for chicken and dumplings, which also involved 3 ounces of bourbon in the recipe, which went into the cook and not into the meal. And then they liked it and they published it.
Prepare the cook.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, okay, now these dumplings have to simmer for a while. It's a good time to pour yourself your first ounce of bourbon.
Well,
Yeah.
that's awesome. One other thing that I want to point out is, you've been back to Austin Peay. You've also helped mentor and provide master class for our students, which I greatly appreciate. What kind of advice would you have for a young theater student?
I can give you a few pieces of advice. One is don't be afraid of criticism, because when you learn that you haven't done something precisely correct, you know that you can fix that next time. It's easy because acting is such a personal thing that when people give you criticism, you take it personally. It's not. Um, build on it. Build on it. Just like in any craft, when people make mistakes, they build on it. I will also say, and this is incredibly important, one of the most sought after casting directors in the business right now started as the receptionist for a casting director. It's very important that when you go into an audition, you are polite to everyone you meet, remember their names. I have a series of books on that wall over there that I've got notes in from auditions I've done over the years. Know their names, because it could be a year or 10 years later, you're going to go into their office. And if they remember you and you don't remember them, you've already gotten off on the wrong foot. Always be nice to everybody, even if they're not nice to you, because one day they might call you back in for something else. They won't if you're not nice to them. I don't mean you have to fawn over them. Just don't call them a jerk.
That's right.
It's all about the experience of learning. Somebody asked me once how I memorized lines so easily, and I said, "Well, I do it by I don't memorize my lines. I learn my lines. And the way you learn lines is to break your script down and go through it. And you learn it and you read it over and over again. And eventually you will know it. You won't have to sit there and try to memorize it, because people who go up on their lines have memorized their lines. They haven't learned their lines. You know, when you approach the lines organically, for me on stage, I learn my lines from my blocking. I know what I say when I'm where I am. On a theater set, you're hitting a mark, and on a film set, you're hitting your mark, and you won't know where it is. Live theater is one of the most organic of all of the acting arts. I taught a class once where film acting, where I first had the class do a scene. 4 or 5 of them did a scene. Then I asked them to do a scene again, and then I took everybody else in the class and put them around them. This is the boom operator. This is the other sound guy. This is the director. This is the photographer who's standing right in front of you. This, and placing all these are the gaffers. They're all, because when you're on a film set, you have to be able to ignore all of them. So you have to get used to, being surrounded by people. And then I showed them a photo of a camera lens that was this big. And I said, I did a movie not too long ago where I had a very emotional scene to deliver, and to an actor. And this is what I was looking at when I gave that scene. I wasn't looking at the actor. In the movie, it looks like I'm looking at the actor, but I was looking at this big black rectangle. So you have to be able to organically see what you're supposed to be seeing and ignore what you're not supposed to be seeing. It's challenging. I will tell you, having a basis in theater before you go into film is helpful, because you will have learned a lot of that already. I can generally tell when somebody is acting in a film or television series if they've had no stage training. I can tell. I can just read it. Somebody asked me once, why do so many Australians and Brits get roles as American actors in American films and TV? And I said, well, for one thing, they can do an American accent better than we can do English accents usually. And secondly, they all train in theater. That's how you become an actor in those places. You start in theater. Nobody starts in film or TV. They start in theater, and they hone the crafts that brings them into being ready to make that transition. It is easier for a theater actor to bring things in close than it is to for somebody who's doing film and TV to with no classical training to bring it out the emotion. If that makes any sense.
Sure.
I mean, the biggest mistake that people who have been in theater for a while make in their first film or TV thing is they're going to be a little too broad because you're used to projecting out there and now you're projecting to here. So, and that's an easy adjustment. But if you haven't had the training and they keep wanting more from you, that's not an easy adjustment to find that spot because you've never had that training before. So I would advise anyone who's going to go into the business, get a really solid foundation in theater before you even think about film and TV. And I still, yeah, the money's great and everything, but I still like being on stage, I mean, I'm still getting residuals from movies and TV things that I did, decades ago. But that live audience thing, that's gold. And so that's what I plan to keep doing. Keep doing theater when I can, keep doing film and TV when I have the opportunity, and enjoying life and just being an actor.
Well, although I'm sure the Clarksville area suffered a minor loss in that they didn't have a veterinarian available to them. I am so glad that you walked over to the music area and then eventually found your way on stage here at Austin Peay because you've had a wonderful career, and we're very glad that you shared your story with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Like I said, I love to share my experiences because I told you I'm shy. I don't like to boast, but I do like to teach. And my experiences, if they can help somebody else, that just makes me very happy.
Well, thanks again for being on the podcast.
It has been my pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
And thanks to all of our viewers and listeners out there for checking out the podcast. We hope you will join us again as we continue to profile some of the outstanding alumni we have here in the College of Arts and Letters at Austin Peay State University. So until next time, stay safe, take care, and God bless.